welcome to An Evening with Nirvana, podcast where I talk to various guests from the Doom community about level design, map making, and content creation. Today on the show I'm talking to Major Arlene. She's a Doom YouTuber, a Cacoward contributing writer, and creator of GzDoom maps like Technicolour Antichrist Box, The Deep, and most recently Breakpoint. Welcome to the podcast, Arlene. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exciting. Well, got to get some GzDoom people on the show, It's been a bunch of boom folks, so
bunch of boomers. Duh.
yeah.
Gosh, how
Exactly.
dare you? Sorry, I had to do it.
That's okay. I appreciate that I am now a boomer. I'm at that age. I'm of the opinion, though, that I think boomer is more of a state of mind. You can be a 20-year-old and be a boomer, in my opinion. But
I agree completely. Um, Definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I've met some 16-year-old boomers. It's been life's interesting like that.
yeah, well, hopefully they grow out of it. Somehow.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, if you've listened to the podcast ever, you're probably aware of the first question that's coming your way. What was your first experience with Doom?
So, my parents were actually like super conservative when I was growing up. And I didn't play video games like unless they were like, Reader Rabbit, like educational stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually took like a really weird like chance anti-bullying campaign that talked a little bit about Columbine. So like I end up being one of those weird people who like found out about Columbine and then found out about Doom through that whole
Mm.
situation. So, like, of course, and this is still happening today, obviously, where video games get blamed for a variety of violent things, and me being the weird person I was like, well, why? So, basically, I downloaded the shareware version of Doom One and got completely freaked out by the Barons of Hell in E1M8, and then I actually ended up just like weirdly falling in love with Doom, and I've been here ever since.
That is an interesting origin story, for sure.
It's a weird origin story, and it's like I didn't talk about it much when I was first getting into the scene because I'm like, people are gonna think I'm weird. They already think I'm weird now, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, I remember I was probably a teenager when I found out about like the whole like the fact that the Columbine people had made maps for Doom and stuff, and you can still
Yeah.
go and download them, and it's very creepy
Hmm.
because like they added in extra like gore effects, and there's clearly something there with regards to like what they were making and
Yeah.
why they were making it. But
It's kind of wild actually, because if you look at my very first map that I made, like in my text file, I'm like, does anybody happen to have more of these maps that you can't find on the internet? Like, and this was 2013 when I made this map. It was like the dumbest thing I could have written, but at the time I was like so like not enamored. Enamored is not the right word, but like I studied forensics as a kid growing up. So like it was like in that like sort of like crime scene psychology investigation mode that I was in when I was young.
hmm,
So like it's just sitting there in that text file and I cringe every time. So
morbid curiosity, I guess. Uh,
indeed.
I mean, it's a big thing though, right? Like all the true crime podcasts and all that stuff. I think there's something in us that finds that, you know,
Yeah.
experiences we're never gonna have, like heightened emotions we'll never experience. I mean, I think that's why horror is like a genre to begin with. you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I think because people sometimes worry that it might happen to them, so they like try to, I don't know, feel prepared, I guess,
Hmm,
just to like see the warning signs. But anyway.
yeah.
um,
Well,
yeah.
unique one. A unique way to get into Doom for sure. But
Hmm.
so what were your? You said you got shareware first. What were your like initial iWAD experiences like?
Um, Interesting because that was Doom was the first like first person shooter game I'd ever played ever, and I'm I wasn't very good at them, and I'm still not very good at them. I'm a little bit better now, but um, it was difficult because I had to learn how to be coordinated
Hmm.
in a way that I wasn't used to. It wasn't like I was like I was athletic at that time a little bit, not you know super athletic, but athletic enough that I felt like I should know better. So it was just like getting over that hump of learning how to play first person shooter games while playing Doom. So it was just like a learning experience more than anything else.
Hmm. And did you? I'm assuming you didn't play Final Doom until a bit later on, or did you play them like all in a row?
I played Doom 1 and 2. I don't think I actually ever finished Plutonia or TNT legitimately. Like I would start them, but I don't think I ever finished them. They just didn't grab me, and they were quite difficult. So I never finished them. So
Hmm.
I'm probably gonna get a lot a lot of mean comments about that, but it is what it is.
Well, no, I think it's kind of common actually with guests where they, uh, some people will just play them much later on. You know, like because people tend to have this thing where it's like, oh, I played Doom as a kid, and then I came back to it like 10 years later or whatever, and then maybe they'll play Final Doom then, or they play it after they've played some other P-Wads and stuff. So I don't know. There are a lot of varying experiences, I think.
Well, it's interesting because like I played and play tested things like, Slaughter Spectrum and Bastion of Chaos for Bridgeburner, which as many people know, like are these really crazy slaughtering maps. But I think the difference between like something like that and TNT is that you have space to move around
Hmm.
with those difficult horde situations, whereas TNT and Plutonia are much more claustrophobic. And I think that's maybe where I tend to struggle a bit on those. So I'm continuing to hone my skills as a player as I map, but it will probably be a little while before I finish.
You heard it here first. TNT is harder than Bastion of Chaos, officially. So you should go play TNT for a challenge, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, so when did you get into custom P-Wads then?
So because I was also like starting to get into the content creation sphere as well, because I thought, well, Markiplier can do it. I can certainly try to do it with, custom WODs if I decide I want to do that sort of thing. But Aquarius 199 is somebody who I ran into very early on. And I he would play all these different custom things, and I said that looks really cool and really fun, and I kind of want to I want to play custom stuff, and then I want to make custom stuff eventually. So he was my very first influence.
Hmm. So YouTube was sort of the impetus for getting into like the custom WADs.
Pretty much, yeah.
Interesting. So, you you did touch on this briefly. The Genocide Center, your very first map. I've seen you stream
uh,
it before, and you definitely have some, different opinions on it now. But like, what were your thoughts regarding the map when you were making it, if you remember?
I think my goal was just to make something that was roughly themed around something, I guess. Um, It was quite interesting, and even now I, like, have to marvel at it because there's a door that goes to a secret that should by no means work, but it works. But, I think mostly just my idea was, let me get a map out, let me even if it looks like absolute garbage, I'm gonna put it out, because it was just, like, something I just wanted to do. For whatever reason, I just wanted to do it. I wanted to get the feel and experience of it, like, you know, done. So
Hmm. Do you think going through that experience of making like a first map with a lot of problems that you can sort of identify later is like a really useful first step for a mapper?
yeah, I always touch on the idea of iteration and not everything that you make has to be perfect. Whenever I'm talking to mappers now, it's like they worry because what they made the first time isn't great. And I'm like, well, if you recognize that it's not great, then you're already taking a step forward to understanding that you need to change your workflow a bit or maybe plan a little bit better or something like that. So like understanding for yourself that failures happen is a really great way of learning how to improve. You can't improve without understanding where your failures come from.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I guess my kind of philosophy now is that the first thing that I make should be the worst thing I ever make, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, like I should. I don't want it to be. I don't want everything to be the same as it, and I don't want anything to be worse than it. So it should be the worst thing, and then I continue to grow from that point, and everything should be sort of better from then on. You got to treat it as like a learning experience, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And as I went back later on, I think probably it was last year, year before, I actually remade the Genocide Center in GzDoom with the things that I'd learned, and it actually felt quite good to come back to it because I saw, the things that I wanted to do and tweak, and remaking that map was quite a good experience. And seeing everybody else in that Doomworld thread do it was quite satisfying.
Yeah, that's definitely a fun idea. Going back to your original stuff. Uh, I know that. Yeah, I think I've talked to a couple of people who've gone back and like looked at their old work and touched it up or used it for other stuff. I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite yeah, and like even now, like so Dancing in the Abyss, which is like my big, total conversion project that I'll eventually get done at some point. Um actually some other mappers have brought to me previous work that they never released from previous years that they decided that they didn't really want to keep messing with it, and they thought it might fit the project. So being able to, work with them and try to get into their headspace, and then they see things that they can do, or get me to do to improve that map. It's quite an interesting journey to being able to grow not only like alone but together. So
hmm Uh, you talked a little bit about sort of the origins of your YouTube channel and stuff already. What was the process like, sort of making your first few videos and like starting to get into like making the WOD review content?
it was interesting because I really badly wanted to be like Aquarius. So like I actually for my first review had played a like jump scare map that he made. So and it's still up on my channel, and like it was just like I walked through it, and later I went back in post and added these captions and like I don't know whatever weird Windows like default caption stuff that they had. So
Yeah.
but it was literally just me saying I don't want to worry too much about how good or great this will look. I am doing this because I just want to try it. So um it was quite interesting, and then growing from there has been quite an interesting journey. So
Yeah, I mean we were we were talking a little bit about editing before we started, and
yeah.
using like Windows Movie Maker or something seems to be, it's a rite of passage you have to go through.
Yeah, exactly. Like you remember like all those, 2013, 14 era videos where people would make lyric videos, and just like
Uh-huh.
you could tell it was like the Windows like video maker default. I
hmm
look back on that fondly because it was like such an innocent time where people there was no pretension in any of it. There was no ego. It was just literally people making the things that they loved making. And I think that was the coolest part of it.
Well, I sort of had the opposite end of it where it was a lot of ego because a lot of my experience around that time was with Halo montages. So,
Ah, yep.
which were like, imagine the most heavily edited video you could picture in your mind, and then double the amount of editing, and that's what went into those. It was like 500 zooms and like 30 color changes,
Oh
and then the
man.
camera would rotate, and then that's so good.
Have I told you about my anime music videos that I did once upon a time?
No, but I'd love to hear about them. Yeah.
I have a second channel where I had to dump all that stuff because I was, once Adpocalypse hit, like I was trying to get my main channel cleaned up so it'd be remonetized, but just it never happened. But I just dumped all my stuff with copyrighted music on my second channel, so they all live there now. So
And and what's the content like? What are these anime
um
videos?
It's literally it was my first time using Sony Vegas actually was how I did those videos. And again, it was like these weird flash transitions and zooms and colors and like all the most god awful transitions you could think of. Um,
The Venetian blind one and
oh, I didn't quite go that far. I had a little bit of taste, but
some star
yeah,
wipes with like the glass breaking sound effect from PowerPoint or something.
yeah, they were quite rough as far as like the standards at the time that I had made them, which was sometime I don't know around like the middle. It was actually when I was like in my 20s because I didn't really start doing this stuff till I was like 17, 18. So like
Mhm.
I was quite far behind, I think, the rest of my peers learning how to do this stuff. And so um, I was like, it was like the middle of my college career when I made all that stuff. So
Well, it lives on.
it
Um,
didn't. Yep.
so you have something like, I don't know, close to like 700 WOD reviews on the channel. Was it difficult finding content to review, or were you just sort of basically like going through id games and just sort of picking through them
Literally,
stuff?
literally I'd go to id games and hit the random button for a while. Like I was getting like, and I would also get some requests. So if I didn't want to play just whatever id games spat out, there were some requests in my inbox. So that was nice to have. But yeah, mostly it was id games, hit the random button, play whatever pops out, and very little editing attached. So
Mhm. The best way to play Doom, definitely.
indeed.
Uh, what kind of YouTube content do you think you'd like to see for Doom that you think is kind of missing at the moment? Is there anything that you can think of in particular?
That's a good question. I actually haven't really been in the YouTube sphere as far as Doom. I don't actually watch a lot of Doom related content, mostly because I focus on making it so much that by the time I'm done making it, I don't watch it.
Hmm.
Um, I think more video editing tutorials might be helpful. There's been a lot of really good text-based ones, but I think maybe some video editing tutorials are missing in the market. I know Bridge has been doing quite a few as channel requests. And I've tried to do a few. If there's a specific topic that came up that would just be easier for me to explain with a video. My Skyboxes tutorial actually did quite well, which was really surprising because that's not the kind of content I normally made. But I think more technical map editing tutorials, I think, is a really big um, gap in the market as far as Doom content.
Yeah, it would be. It would definitely be cool if like there was some part of the like the GzDoom development team or the Ultimate Doom Builder team or something that could sort of put together things that perhaps came off as like official or could be tagged with some sort of officiality to them, and then sort of kept all in one place as sort of dev
Yeah, I think
tutorials or something like that would be really good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because it's kind of just piecemeal among different, individual creators who have, had the need to make something like that over the years, but no real single place. There were people like Chubb Stoomer who did quite a few for Doom Builder 2 back in the day, but
Hmm.
I don't know how
I
much
think I
he
remember
does
them, yeah.
now.
And
Yeah.
I think Dragonfly had some stuff on his side at one point. I can't really remember.
Yeah, he has a lot of good text-based tutorials on his website, but I don't think anything that was really video-based.
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked to a few different people. I sort of tend to put this question to people because there are definitely gaps, I think, personally. And that is probably the biggest one that comes up. It's just like tutorial content for making maps and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because you had to have the technical know-how, not only the technical know-how, but know how to explain to somebody else like how to do the thing. Because
Hmm.
you're sitting there and you're doing the steps, you know exactly what you're doing, and you can just go fly through and do it. But it's like that with, any job that you go to or whatever. And so, but you try to explain it to somebody and you're just like, how do I do that thing again? So
Yeah, and making that kind of content is very dry as well. Like, you have to be
yeah,
willing to
it's
sit there and just go step by step through a list of things. And then that's the video kind of thing, I guess. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's quite difficult and difficult to make fun, not only for yourself but for the viewer. So because you want to engage a bit, but you
Yeah.
have to get all the technical nitty gritty in there.
Yeah, I watched this Premiere Pro tutorial the other day for something actually, and it was so good. The guy, it was like this British guy with like the greatest voice ever for video that's ever existed, and I was just like, it's the perfect tutorial. But
Hey,
I'll get him involved somehow.
yes, do it.
So back to actual mapping talk. What made you join the Verse Hopper community project back in the day?
So that was run by Obake or Obaki. I'm not exactly sure how he says his name, but he had actually sent in quite a few Doom mods to me to review back when I was first starting my channel. I think actually like only the fifth channel or the fifth review that I did on my channel is like one of the first things that he ever sent me. So at that point, we built a rapport, and he wanted mappers for this project, and I said sure. It's something for me to do, so I did.
Hmm. And did you think of this as sort of a way to learn about like GzDoom features as well as like generally improving your mapping?
Yeah, exactly. So like because I had a good defined theme for the map, it was quite easy for me to just go sit down and say, okay, like, you know, I want this to look like a mall of some kind. I know what shops look like, and how there's the little kiosks in the middle. So it was the structure actually wasn't too hard to create. So it was just focusing on like things like floor glow and ceiling glow and how to script and do those sorts of things. Really just kind of dig into some more of the technical stuff that I needed to do. So it was actually quite a good project for me to learn how to do those features.
Hmm. And you sort of did a couple of community projects around this time. I was wondering what your experience was like with Joy of Mapping 6. What did you take away from that community project?
That was chaotic as fuck. Because it was a 3-day project, and this was right around the time that I had actually met, people like, Bridgeburner and the Hellforge crew and all of them, at that time. So it was not only like a matter of trying to figure out how to make a cohesive UDMF map that looked good in 3 days, but also like learning who different people were at that time that maybe could help me in the future. But it was great because it allowed me to branch out and meet people. I can't remember how many maps in total it ended up being. It was a lot. So it was a lot of people to meet as well.
Yeah. And do you find that, because I mean 3 days makes it fundamentally like a speed map. I remember, I think it was Joy Mapping 6 that I worked on as well. I can't remember. But
Mhm.
it was definitely a bit of a rush. Do you find speed mapping like useful as a tool for you, or is it not something that you do that much?
It has become useful in some aspects. Like it's not my favorite thing to do because I tend to be very um, languid as a mapper. I'm very slow because I like to ponder and take my time and put in details as I go. Um, because I'm always like of the idea of like I got to do like some environmental storytelling of some kind.
Hmm.
And so, um, but I find it useful for at least trying to get some basic ideas out that you may have had in your head for a while. You just hadn't had a good time to like put them into a map. So speed maps for me tend to be a bit throwaway. So I just sort of like doodle things, and if they ended up working out, I've actually put them into other maps and dressed them up to be something bigger, or something part of something a bigger map, but be a proper functioning piece of a map. Since most of those tended to be like you know a hallway or two, and then basically like an arena and then the exit.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think it is actually. I think people think of speed mapping and they think, well, it's like making a full map as a speed map. But for instance, me and Mega, we've been working on this project for a bit, and one thing we did was speed mapping sessions where uh we'd build for an hour, and it would just be you build one encounter. So we would build a room and an encounter within it, and then you could use that and just like slap it into a map, like attach it to something. So it works as
Yeah,
like a really good
exactly.
way to just cut out that annoying part of the process where you have a blank slate and then,
Yeah,
actually get
exactly.
something.
Yeah. Which was ironically kind of the idea I had when I was doing the relay race map for Bridget's New Year's Eve podcast this past time. And actually, it ended up being like a really good cohesive map overall. Like, I was
Mm.
really surprised how people managed to make it so cohesive and fun while only having an hour and trying to build off of somebody else's work. It was strange and it was wonderful.
Yeah, Archie, when I talked to him, he was telling me that the Russian community used to do that actually. They would,
Ah,
yeah, they would build like a piece of a map and then send it to the next person, and then they would add on to it and stuff. Uh,
yeah. That's a really fun way of mapping I've found actually. So
Although he showed me one of the maps and it was like a bunch of Russian Doom community memes. And I was like, this is maybe the most esoteric thing I've ever seen in my life. I just had no idea what was going on. He was trying to explain like these Russian memes to me, and I was like, I have no idea.
oh my gosh.
It was
That
cool
has
though.
to be an interesting experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, like when you have communities that are knit like that, and everybody does a chip in. Even though from the outside it's kind of hard to see in, it feels good to build something as a community as well, I think. So I think that's probably the appeal of that.
Yeah, definitely a cool idea. Uh, so around that time in 2019, when you were like joining community projects and stuff, do you think you were starting to become a bit more confident in your style?
Definitely. Like I think I had developed a style and fairly early on, and finding your feet, I think is something that people struggle with when they are starting out, like finding your style and finding your voice. And I was a little bit worried for a little while that I was trying to be too much like other people, like, Bridge. I talk about him a lot, but he really truly was like my first and my biggest mentor when it came to mapping in those formative years. And so I would style my maps a bit like his, a lot like his. Not, nearly as good, but I took a lot of lessons from him, but then I realized I was like, there are other things I would like to do. I
Mm-hmm.
would like to build things that are different and like, of course, because I was just starting out as like a video game player that wasn't, just the Reader Rabbit stuff. Like I realized I'm like, I can't make maps like Bridge Runner because I can't play the maps that Bridge Runner makes. Like not in like a any decent capacity. So I'm like, let me make the things that I know that I can play. So it caused me to know that I would need to scale down some in order to accommodate the kind of gameplay that I wanted to bring to my maps that I knew that I could test appropriately and create from there. So
Mm-hmm. And you sort of talked about like the Hellforge and stuff like that earlier on, and getting involved with that community of people. How do you think not just Bridge, but that sort of whole community of mappers has influenced you in your own mapping endeavors?
they I would say were quite formative because you get so many different people from so many different walks of life that you pick up a little from different people. You know, like the Mr. Cat is like this insane coding whiz. Like anytime he makes a speed map, he doesn't map. Like he makes some insanely detailed coded like scene of some kind, and so he's a great resource for learning how to code really specialized things. Or you have um, Insane Gazebo, whose side def adventures are lessons to be learned in how to deal with limits. Or you have Liberation, who um, pretty much taught me how to be a vanilla mapper for a few maps. He did his best with that. So
Mm.
um, all different kinds of people who love all different kinds of things, and it's a really good mixed group of people.
Hmm. In terms of like mapping for UDMF, what do you think some of the major hurdles are to overcome compared to working with Boom and stuff?
I think part of it is because you literally could do anything you wanted in UDMF. It's I think it's like it's too many choices for people. Like once you get the basics of like your actions have flags rather than you having to do a generalized action, with the W2, or the walk repeatable, door or whatever it is that you're doing in Boomer vanilla. Um, I think that's really the major hurdle is it's a different workflow because you do have so many different options as to what you can do in UDMF. So I think it's just really intimidating is all, as a
Hmm.
format.
Yeah. So you were sort of trying to find your own style and aesthetic and stuff. Where did the idea for Technicolour Antichrist Box come from?
That came about because I don't know. It really was one of those things. I think I had maybe come off it was probably coming off of, like, Ancient Aliens, because I really enjoyed the aesthetic style of that. And I wanted to make something that was just, like, a little bit edgier. I'd done some doodles, early on that have been just, like, lost to the vaults of time now of different, concepts I wanted to have of, like, this really, sorta colorful void hell sort of thing. And also like Slaughter Spectrum, Refracted Reality came out around that time. And so those were quite influential, I think, in my overall like want of aesthetic. I wanted to make something bright because like at least once, because I'm like, you know, Doom, it's full of like it's not like it's not like Doom isn't colorful, but like, I wanted to get outside the normal palette of the things that I would see, and pink was something that I didn't see a lot of, so I was like, "Yeah, I think pink and I think cyan would be a really cool color combination that I don't see anybody else doing, so we're gonna make that."
Hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of my decisions are like, what have I not seen done before? What what MIDI hasn't been used before? What sort of style of encounter hasn't been done before? I feel like you're often striving for some kind of uniqueness anyway, when there are like 3 billion different Doom mods out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So what were the major influences for the aesthetics of the WOD? Was it mostly triggered just by the palette choices?
Yeah, actually, so, like, because I had struggled a little bit with, like, I think I struggled the most with, like, the original uh, blue for the Doom palette. It's quite a hard set of blues to really work around. So I wanted, the cyan was something that I really just wanted, needed, and wanted to work into that aesthetic, I guess. So
Hmm.
I was going somewhere with that.
Well, you also have sort of like you tend to use like a lot of plant life and stuff integrated into your maps. Is that sort of paradise influenced a little bit, or is that just
Yeah,
something you
yeah.
wanted to do?
So yeah, because so Supercharge we used for Map Witch too. I think this was um I Supercharge was actually a later addition to the maps. I didn't make Technicolor with Supercharge in mind when I first started it. And then I think around that time we had started working on Map Witch 2. I got paired up with Tango. And then he showed me, how fun it was to map with Supercharge. And then the plants, I think, were probably like my favorite thing about it. Like, because you see trees and plants and foliage in a lot of Doom maps, but not like green foliage, I guess, is a little bit less, a little bit less likely to find it in a lot of things. So um, I enjoyed the foliage, and it was actually in a little bit of a way, like it was also like a tribute to my mom who has one of the best green thumbs I've ever seen. I did not inherit it from her, but I'm like, well, if I can't have plants in real life, I can at least have them in Doom. So
Oh yeah, one way to get around it for sure. So in terms of combat, you tend to sort of like err towards slaughter territory. What are your main source of inspiration for that kind of gameplay? Is it mostly bridge?
I would probably say Bridge, but also a little bit of Insane Gazebo. I can't remember when I started playing Sunder. It wasn't around the time that the originals had come out, but when he had come back and started being more active in the Hellforge, I think is when I had started playing Sunder, and I was quite taken by how IG tended to craft his encounters. These, and of course they're big grandiose spaces, and I will never make anything that immense that would be that cohesive. Um, but the way that he managed to still have these big spaces, but have these hordes that would still box you in, I found quite inspiring, and thought that that was a really interesting way to tackle combat design.
Hmm. And talk to me about like working with Supercharge. I guess like where the initial idea came from and what the experience of like balancing encounters for it is like.
Yeah, so like I said, MapWitch 2, we had actually integrated Supercharge into it. And actually made the set for Xandronum so it was co-op compatible.
Hmm.
I've not had much luck making things for Xandronum. Haven't I don't think I've done it since MapWitch 2 rather. So but I found because it's more like it's more like a vanilla plus mod. It's grown a little bit beyond that, I think, in the newer updates, but at the time it still felt very adjacent to vanilla because you still had the main uh, Doom weapons and the main like Doom roster, but you had additions like the flying Mancubi and the Diabolus that would allow you to still um, change up your combat just enough to um, make it feel fresh without making it feel so far removed from Doom. So it actually ended up becoming a very, very fun mod to work with.
Yeah, I think that's what's fun about it. And I talked to Tango about this when I when I interviewed him, is that it is unlike a lot of other weapon mods, it does kind of try to stick to the vanilla roots a little bit, which I think helps it.
Yeah, actually, it was really quite interesting. One of my good streamer friends, Jared Bear, decided to give Breakpoint a roll, and he was like, "This feels like classic Doom, but better." And I'm like, "That's I think the goal of this mod." He was really taken by the super shotgun sound. I thought it
Hmm.
was because he was like, I hate anything that messes with the super shotgun, but I really like this super shotgun in supercharged." So
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I'm not a big aficionado when it comes to gameplay mods, but definitely one of the better ones I've played.
yeah, yeah, and because I actually tend to stick more towards vanilla behavior myself. I wasn't huge into mods because I was more focused on levels and level design at that time. So yeah, modding was not my bag, but I think Supercharge was a really good like introduction to that sort of thing.
Hmm. You made a map called the Deep, which was related to 3D Realms event, Realms Deep. Could you talk about like why that event is important to you and what made you want to create the map?
Yeah, so Realms Deep, I actually got introduced to the concept by the Motherlode who runs the In the Keep podcast, and he's a good friend. But he was really, really jazzed because he's like, there are some games that use the GzDoom engine that I think you should see in this event. So I watched the first one. So this map was done for the second iteration, and yeah, I'd completely fallen in love with the indie scene from the first time around, and the fact that you had these, single developers creating things, and you had, things like Supply Switch, as we know, like people like Mechadon and Esoforium and Jimmy are all working on people that we know moving on to create whole games. Was really inspiring to me, so I wanted to contribute something for that uh, whole ordeal the second go around.
Right. And I guess the theming is similar to Technicolour Antichrist for this one, but I feel like the combat felt like a little bit more fluid. Do you think you'd learned a few things about making combat for Supercharge at this point?
Yeah, so I think that's, I don't know, the third supercharge map that I'd made at that point. Something that had it like properly integrated. And yeah, I think I had learned how to use the bestiary a bit better. And I think at that point there was an update that added a couple more enemies, so like the grenadiers and stuff like that. I could be wrong, but
Hmm.
I think it had updated a bit. So Tango had also improved the mod to be used as well. So the mod felt better, as well as, learning how to use it a bit more, I think helped.
Hmm. And do you find that uh are you starting to find like a happy middle ground for yourself in terms of GzDoom features as well? Do you think there's maybe a habit early on for people to kind of want to do like utilize everything, and then do you find that you have to kind of rein yourself in and use like just specific things that maybe works like well for the WOD?
Yeah, I blew past sector lighting really hard because dynamic lighting, and especially like attenuated lighting, really made it so much simpler for me to like just not have to worry about how I was lighting things. But as I found out as time has gone on, like you still do need to do some sector lighting to make it not look so uniform throughout, and especially for people who will just keep dynamic lights off for whatever reason, whether it just be their system or a preference. You still want to light your maps, and so that is a lesson that I am still constantly learning. I think as far as UDMF, because as lovely as the lights are, and now we might get the baked-in lighting, which would be helpful to the workflow. I think it's good to know sector lighting should you decide to map in another format. It's really important, I think. So
Hmm.
definitely don't blow past that one.
Yeah, I think a good mix of sector lighting and dynamic stuff can work really well actually in GZDoom.
Yeah, definitely.
So Hordemex is an interesting one. You contributed quite a few maps to the project, and I guess I was wondering if you could talk a bit about, um, I guess just about the WOD and like Odomex in general and stuff for people that might not be familiar.
Sure. So, Odomex, I'm actually not huge into the multiplayer scene, so I can't explain Odomex that well, other than to just tell you that it's a multiplayer port similar to like Xandronum or ZDaemon or something like that. It does support, it doesn't support quite the features that Xandronum does. I think it's probably about a mix between like Xandronum and ZDaemon, I would say, is I think the best way to describe it. And then they added a horde, what they call a horde mode, which is kind of like Skull Tag or Xandronum Invasion
Hmm.
style maps, but these are a little bit, instead of waiting for the waves to come out of like different corners of the map, um, you have you know just spawns of some type, and they don't necessarily have to be behind a wall. They could just be wherever you decide to put them in the map. So it allows for a little bit more flexibility for that style of mapping, I think.
Hmm. And what's the process like for creating like a horde map? Like how is it different, I guess, to making something based around standard gameplay?
So basically, you just kind of have to be mindful of how you place different spawn points. So you'd have like your supply spawn points, your power up spawn points, and then your small enemies, larger enemies, and then your boss enemies. So you would have to actually have like one of each. As the waves, coding will call on those spawns to have call on the map to have those spawns ready in a certain number. I think as long as you have one of each, you're good. But you have to have like one of each, like kind of boss and all that stuff in order for the waves to work correctly.
And what is like I seem to remember like having this explained to me at the time, talking to someone when people were making maps for it. But what's sort of the gameplay loop, I guess, um, for Hortomix?
So you pretty much, I would think a lot of people likened it to deathmatch, where you want people to be able to run through the maps, without being impeded. And you want to keep that flow as open as you can for monsters. as well.
Hmm.
Because the maps, of course, can get crowded with the monsters and then also get crowded with the players. So you want to give enough, like, room for, people to have some shelter, but not so much that they can just hide from everything all the time. So I would say I would liken it very much to deathmatch mapping.
Hmm. And it's sort of you basically will kill like a horde of monsters, like a wave begins, and then you kill them, and then eventually you work your way up to like a boss wave. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then it kind of
Correct.
gets
So
more and more
actually,
challenging.
yeah, so like each wave actually has a boss. So you kill the boss of that wave. And no matter how many enemies you have on the map, then the next wave will start until it's all done. So you had to basically kill like a certain amount of like, just regular horde enemies, and the boss for each wave comes through. And then once you kill that boss, then you go to the next wave and then the next and the next.
Hmm. And is Hordemex something that is planned to maybe continue into like having like would there be like a Hordemex for this year where people would be able to contribute maps again, community project style?
I hope so. It was actually quite an interesting experience because I actually hadn't planned on mapping for it. My brain was in the world of I'm going to focus on dancing in the abyss now, and that didn't quite work out. So
Hmm.
I end up mapping for Hordemex, and it was actually good because they're still fairly like bite-sized maps. And you could really just go ham on a certain concept. And I think that was what really attracted people. Like, you had people like making a map that looked like a motherboard or, like a little, city block or something like that. So you could just really go find a concept that you liked and then stick with it. I don't know. I hope they do it as maybe not a yearly or maybe a bi-yearly tradition. That would maybe more be a question for like Zanero, since he was really the mastermind behind that whole project. But I hope we do more of those because it was really, really quite fun and it was a good community building project.
Hmm. So you've mentioned Dancing in the Abyss a couple of times, and I don't know how much you want to talk about it. I think you do map for it on stream and stuff, so maybe not top secret, but do you want to talk a little bit about that project and sort of what is going into it?
Yeah, sure. So it's my total conversion mod. That I didn't plan on it being a total conversion mod at the time. It was just going to be like, I don't know, 13 maps, and I was just gonna do some Doom enemies and maybe some different updated weapons. It was still going to be very much the style like Technicolour Antichrist Box or something like that. So these sort of void style maps. But as time went on, I realized I wanted, because it was also like more of a lore based sort of thing. I wanted to base it first around like this this thing called Lord of the Dance. It was this like Irish tap dancing thing that I was absolutely obsessed with when I was a kid. Back when Michael Flatley was really relevant and all that. So like if you've ever heard of Riverdance, it's that spin-off. So
Yeah,
um but
I know of it. I think everyone
yeah.
goes through their Irish dancing phase, obviously.
Yeah. So, it felt like just like going like it. I don't know where I think the idea came. Actually, I'll tell you where the idea came from. It was me writing a college paper about a place that I wanted to like go. Like we had to write some college, paper for like a place we wanted to go or whatever, or talk about a city. And I picked Dublin. And then I was like, I wonder if I still have that old Lord of the Dance VHS tape. And I did, and I watched it, and I'm like, I can make do maps around this, I bet. So it's kind of evolved from like wanting to make this about the plot of this dance concert to actually boring more into like Irish mythology. Because it's such a little explored topic that I was like, could do that. So it's still very loose and in the works. I've got a couple levels in the works for it, but nothing really concrete and complete. It's very much in its phases of figuring out what the hell I'm doing with it still. So,
Hmm. And so when you say total conversion, like what kind of I guess what kind of changes are you aiming to make in terms of like gameplay and stuff?
so I've got a new set of weapons already done. So I got sprites by the very illustrious elevator who is doing artwork and stuff for Hellslinger. Um, and I don't know, like found weapon like ideas off of like Realm 667 or just trolling around the bit the repository to see just what I could dig up, what could I put in uh, to make it not feel so much like Doom, maybe make it feel a little bit more like Heretic or Hexen instead. Um, so I think that's more or less the direction that it's headed right now, as far as being a total conversion.
Hmm. And you said you had a couple of levels underway. You sort of bouncing around between maps then.
Yeah, pretty much. There's one that's almost done. It was actually a map that Jazzmaster had created for another project that he decided he no longer wanted to use, and he had offered me that map instead to use in my project. So it's pretty. I would say it's pretty close to done. It needs combat work, but it's pretty done. And then the first map that I made, I'm in the process of reworking. It's more or less completed. I just have to do some rescaling work to it to make it not feel so obscenely. It's too tall, I think overall is the problem. So
Hmm.
I had to do some scaling fixing for that. So
And is that going to be? Are we talking megawatt length here? Is this the one woman megawatt scenario?
I don't know. I'll have to find out. I was hoping to get a few more people involved in the project because I realized it's not that fun to work on a project by yourself. Some people it is, but for more than a few levels, sometimes it can be really, really difficult. I have nothing but admiration for the people who do this by themselves because I couldn't. But
Yeah,
we'll see. We'll see how big it gets. I'll just have to see how much stuff I can conceptualize.
it can definitely be grueling, but I think that's where your like internal testing people tend to be helpful because then you
Yeah,
have someone to
absolutely.
bounce stuff off. Uh, so to jump into something a little bit different, I wanted to talk about your Cacoward's contributions.
Okay.
When did you first get involved with that, and how did that come about?
So I believe that would have been 2018 awards. So 2018, 19, no, 2019 awards. So I would have been asked around in 2018, I think, because I believe Tarnsman had left at that point. I can't remember exactly. Starts with a T, but somebody left and they needed a replacement, and they asked me because I guess Ling had seen my work on YouTube, and they decided they wanted somebody with a little bit more with a different perspective on things to contribute. So they asked me.
Hmm. And uh, I'm not sure how much detail you can go into, but what's sort of the process like for selecting like Cacoward recipients and stuff?
Um, Pretty much we find stuff that looks cool and we play it, and if we decide that it stands above the rest, we award it. Is pretty much the way it goes. We talk a lot. I think there's a lot of internal discussion um, that surprisingly doesn't bubble to the surface. Because I can tell you, there were days where I would open up my phone at lunch and see the the chat just like with hundreds of messages, and I'm like, "What happened? Did something blow up?" Like, so. But the people who write for the CAP Awards are very passionate about talking about level design, mapping theory. It's a lot of very impassioned discussion about different things that they see in each level that they play.
Hmm. So there have been some like particularly controversial ones then.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you, I think there was like a Benjo one. I think that was in 21.
Is it down the drain? Because that should have won.
Yeah,
I'm just
that
saying.
one
I'm
I
putting that one out
rail. I
there.
tried. I tried so hard to like it because they were like they swore by it. Like two people swore by it, two people hated it, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it because I gotta. But but I also recognize when, even if there's something that was a controversial pick between all of us, you kind of have to step back from your own ego and say, okay, what is everybody else seeing in the squad that I'm not seeing? And it could be, I think with Benjo, I think part of it was like, I don't know, it was a coming back to simpler level design concepts and but still integrating design puzzles that people hadn't seen before, hadn't really experienced. So even though it wasn't for me, I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. So
Yeah, it's a great one. It that's my maybe my only major gripe with the Cacoward was that one not winning. That was my number one word for the year. I loved it.
yeah. Yeah, it was. I think there was a lot of really difficult discussion about several different wads, and but that's
Hmm.
why you get a diverse group of writers, and I think they do try to get some new blood in there. They got after I left, they got in Terminus and Vile, both of whom are quite different players from each other. So they do, at the very least, try to have a variety of opinions in there. So it's not just like people who are like vanilla purists, awarding everything. So
Yeah, definitely good to have like a wide gamut, especially if like if you have people who are gonna mostly be looking at the GZ stuff, and then maybe you have someone to tackle like Vile. Obviously, you want him probably looking at the slaughter stuff and more challenging stuff because he's such an exceptional player.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, definitely good to have sort of
So
specialized people.
yeah, my specialization tended to be like UDMF stuff and then pretty things.
Right. Yeah.
Like I admittedly am very much an aesthetics first kind of person. So like if there's something that I see, I will, that I think I'll like, I'll give it a chance and be a little bit more tolerant to whatever bullshit the wad is putting me through if it looks pretty. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's why they say in cooking, plating is everything. Very important.
Hmm.
Uh, I guess also, talking about writing, you're also a contributing writer to Reload magazine. Um,
Yes.
could you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about writing for the magazine and how you got involved?
Yeah, so probably, just the main thing to know is that because I was more or less, getting myself involved in Realms Deep, we all kind of found each other. It was through the previous magazine, E1M1, that I kind of met, the people there, and then things happened and we branched out to be on Reload. But it's a great experience to again really just work with a lot of really passionate developers and a chance to give their work some voice and some push into the industry. Because I think the one thing that like indie devs sorely lack is marketing. It's incredibly hard to market yourself when you are focused, nose down, 80 hours a week trying to make your game
Hmm.
by yourself. So, the hope of Reload and publications like that is to just give these devs a voice that they may not have otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's quite a big problem for like artists or like creative people in general these days, where you have to be like your whole marketing team at the same time, and if you're not, you're
Yeah,
just like straight up behind everybody else.
yeah, it's especially bad if you try not to have an ego about it. Like
Mm.
you have to believe in your own bullshit enough to really like put yourself out there and market yourself. And like half the time you're like, but I don't want to sound stuck up, but like you kind of have to. Like you have to be passionate and confident in the work that you put out. And it's a hard thing for people who are just starting out because they don't think of themselves as professional half the time. They think of themselves as, oh, I'm bebopping around and trying to make money off this thing that maybe somebody will like and maybe somebody won't. So, it's such a struggle, I think, with everybody who's creative to market themselves.
Yeah, and then like I don't know, you'll see ads looking for it'll be like looking for a social media manager or whatever, and they're like, we
Right.
want you to know how to write, and we want you to know how to video edit and do photography and do Photoshop work, know the entire Adobe suite, and we're gonna pay you like $12 an hour or something.
Yeah. It's
I don't know.
insane.
But they're basically, this is what you have to become these days if you want to be, you're someone who just wants to paint, but now you also have to know how to paint and video edit and make montages for Instagram and market yourself in a million different ways.
Yeah,
and it's nuts.
and remember to post on Patreon every now and again and do your commission. Like it's so much just insane work that creatives have to do to survive in the industry, which is why so many of them have full-time jobs on top of everything else that they're attempting to do. So yeah, it's quite an interesting struggle, which is I think why publishers have become a more prevalent topic of discussion. I think among those devs, but at the same time they're just like, but what if things go wrong? So
Yeah.
it's quite an interesting discussion all around to have.
Yeah, for sure. uh I don't know that there's a great solution for it. I think a lot of it also comes from this sort of need for everything to be content these days, and probably some amount of like, if you're an artist and it's like, well, I'm doing this, but like I could turn the process into content or whatever, and uh, you just always have this thing in the back of your head of, well, I should constantly be producing at all times, like everything should be commodified, which
Yeah, it's something that I struggled with quite a bit as I've gotten older, and I'm not making as much content as I used to. Like I stream now instead of doing YouTube because YouTube just got too difficult to deal with, and like I wasn't making money off of it at all because I couldn't get my channel remonetized. So
mhm,
go to Twitch, but then you have to sit down for 3 hours or more a day and be switched on enough to do what you need to do. So it does. It tends to be a bit of a struggle to like know when to like stop or know if you can stop commodifying literally everything about the process that you do. So
yeah.
yeah.
uh so Breakpoint, it's your most recent release. What did you want to do differently with this one compared to your previous stuff?
Not use marble. That's pretty much how I describe it. Is this was my chance to stop using marble in maps for a little while. I cheated a little bit on a couple maps, but it was for good reasons, I promise. Um, but no, it was a chance for me to get away and do something that I don't usually do, which is tech bases. I've done a couple in the past, like my joy mapping six map was decidedly pretty about the most tech basy thing I've done up to this point. So um, yeah, I love tech bases, but I have a hard time making them. So I said I'm going to sit down. I'm going to make tech bases, and that's where Breakpoint ended up coming to be.
It happens to everyone. Rubik's was saying to me at one point that every single person eventually comes back and makes some kind of episode 1 remake, so you're on your way.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, was this originally going to be a multi-person project, or did more people just sort of come on board as you like discussed it more?
No, so this was actually just going to be me on this project, and kind of like I discovered with Dancing in the Abyss, I realized I wanted to involve other people because it would give the WOD, I think, a lot more flavor. Um, and as it turned out, like, people like Velvetic and Guard Soul and Jazzmaster and Remy were all kind of, I don't think they were all looking for things to do, but they really seemed on board with the concept because I made the spreadsheet of how I wanted each map to look and how the progression would look. And when I brought it forward, and then was sort of mentioning in passing to people like in my voice chats or whatever, they'd be like, "Do you want help with it?" And I'd go, "Okay, sure." And eventually, I just picked up the people I picked up, and we just ended up working on it all together.
Hmm. And in terms of like encounter design this time, I feel like maybe Technicolour Antichrist was your most structured like arena combat, and then the deep and this feel a little bit more free flowing, I guess. Is that something you're aiming for more these days?
Yeah, well, it wasn't necessarily a super intentional choice. Well, it was, well, I take that back. For Breakpoint, it definitely was intentional that it was more incidental combat rather than more arena style stuff, because I realized I was like, it's hard to make this stuff feel interesting all the time. I wanted to make something that would keep the player on their toes more often rather than having a lot of a lot of really heavy ebbs and flows. Doing something that was a little bit more languid in nature, I think, kind of broke myself out of that headspace for a little bit. It was something different to do.
Hmm. And so you use Supercharge again for this. Uh, do you think that it will sort of continue to be like a constant thread for you using Supercharged? Is it mostly sort of your preferred way to play Doom?
I don't know. It's because I tend not to actually load up mods unless I have to. I adore Supercharged. Anytime there's something, being played with Supercharged, I'll play it. Absolutely. But I think I actually do want to branch out to other gameplay mods just for variety, to kind of give myself a chance to branch out a little bit more, and get a feel for different types of combat, as far as modded combat goes. So
Hmm. Uh, and like I guess when you're designing maps, you said you're like an aesthetics first kind of person. Is that sort of does that track in terms of the way you map? Do you sort of construct your architecture first and then sort of fill in combat afterwards?
more or less, yeah. Like, actually, the secret map for Breakpoint went through several. My piece of it went through quite a few iterations because I was actually struggling a little bit to uh, figure out like cyber demon combat. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Hmm. So a little bit of kind of thinking about encounters here and there and implementing them, and then
Yeah,
aesthetics
yeah,
after. And
exactly.
yeah, okay.
Exactly, yeah. Particularly because the secret map was again sort of a Franken map would be a little bit less of a correct term for that, more like um it was pieced together with different people contributing, but um with a little bit more intent this time around. So I had to be conscientious of how people had designed their pieces of the map and make my piece fit what they had done. So
Right. And is Dancing with the Abyss sort of the next big thing on the menu, or are you probably gonna keep that as something in the background and then sort of be releasing other stuff?
I think it'll stay in the background for a little bit longer. I'm actually getting ready to go through quite a life-changing move to a completely different country. So
Whoa.
uh it'll be a little while before I get back to it, but I do have another 9 map episode currently being conceptualized, where me and the boys are deciding whether or not, what we're going to do for the next set. So it'll still be um all of us working together on this next project. Something smaller and bite-sized just feels more manageable to do. I'll just keep dancing in the abyss to work on rainy days, when I want to play with marble again.
So the marble's back. That's a big spoiler.
Exactly.
For it. uh, okay, well, it's time for the final question.
All
What
right.
is your favorite Doom monster and why? And I guess if it's something from Supercharge, you may you can add an addendum, favorite Doom
Oh,
monster, and
okay.
then you can have favorite Supercharge monster additionally.
So I guess anybody who knows my combat design knows I like the Pain Elemental. I know it's one of the most hated monsters, but I find them quite utilitarian because they're able to because they float, they move, so you're able to have a bit of verticality, and it's like a timer of sorts where you have to like move in and focus and prioritize that target. It's a really great way of making people think on their feet, I think. And for like the supercharged monster, the grenadier, it's it's a small monster, so you can kind of stick it anywhere, and then it has, it's a little bit unpredictable, and you can just sort of stick it in a corner and then have a grenade bounce to the player's feet and just completely mess with them. It's a great monster. I love it.
Yeah, and they have that fun Quake grenade noise. So.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing. That's probably one of my favorite Quake sounds, besides like the zombie dying noise.
Right. Yeah, no, Pain Elemental is a good choice. They're definitely an interesting monster because they're almost entirely built around like filling up space more than anything.
Yeah. So um they worked for a while when I was doing bigger stuff. I tended to shy away from them when I was doing Breakpoint this time around, because I was like, if I put more pain elementals in this thing, somebody's gonna kill me. So
Yeah. You can also do really weird stuff with them that you can't do with other enemies. Like, if you put them in really tight encounters, you can do stuff where like you might have to like you can kind of force the player to back up into them and stick to them so they can't produce lost souls, and then have an encounter where the player kind of has their back to this enemy the entire time.
yeah, like it's good. Like if you can get the player to move and rush to that pain elemental and like just try to get up in its face. It's really interesting the ways that you can kind of build your combat around that sort of scenario, but it depends on player targeting as well. So
Yeah, you got to plug the lost soul hole. That's the
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
well, yeah, that'll wrap things up. Thanks so much for coming on. Pleasure to talk to you. And I guess I'm always interested as someone a little bit outside of GzDoom. I've worked with UDMF a decent amount, honestly, and Hex and format before that back in the day, so I do sort of know a little bit about it. But I'm always interested in like the UDMF sphere, and kind of hoping to see like new and interesting things coming out of it. So yeah, it's definitely cool to hear about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it was great. And thanks everybody for listening. I'll be back next time with another guest, so stick around for that. And goodbye.
Peace.